The silver lining to this cloud is that the folks at NIST, National Institute for Standards and Technology, have spent the last 6 years working with cryptographers basically around the planet on sort of bring the Justice League together, superheroes assemble kind of job to say, hey, how do we find algorithms that are not vulnerable to these kinds of attacks?
Welcome to the Reimagining Cyber podcast, where we share short and to the point perspectives on the cyber landscape. It's all about engaging yet casual conversations on what organizations are doing to reimagine their cyber programs while ensuring their business objectives are top priority. With my co-host, Stan Wisseman, Head of Security Strategist, I'm Rob Borrego, Chief Security Strategist, and this is Reimagining Cyber.
So Stan, who do we have joining us for this episode?
Rob, our guest today is Terrence Spies, the CTO of CyberRisk Voltage. Terrence is a veteran cryptographic engineer. He architected the original Microsoft Crypto API certificate server and is a founding member of the Voltage security capability and product. In addition to building cryptographic systems, he's a co-inventor of format preserving encryption and has headed multiple standards groups. Terrence, is there anything else you'd like to add to your extensive background for our listeners? I know it's extensive. That's not to say that you're old. I'm just saying that you have done a lot.
Yeah, I told people I've stopped doing the subtraction for how many years I've been fighting the crypto battle. It's been interesting.
Terrence, we wanted to bring you on to the podcast to delve into quantum computing's potential impact on our ability to protect data using encryption. Encrypted data, appears as random collection of alphanumeric characters, and in general, encrypted algorithms are vulnerable to brute force attacks, given enough time and compute power. However, we seem to be doing well with the encryption algorithms we have today, and they're adequate against most attacks. Are cryptanalytically relevant quantum computers, or CRQCs, a game changer? That's what we're hearing in the press. That's a potential game changer, at least, and how we need to protect our data with encryption.
Yeah, let me set just a little bit of context by rewinding to one of the earlier things I said that you said I think is really relevant. The tragedy of security systems in general and cryptography specifically is that, unlike other areas of computer science or other areas of software that people might be buying, it's one of the things where you can't demonstrate the most important properties of those systems, right? Like I loved what you said is like, encrypted data just looks like this bunch of gobbledygook. And the problem, and this is relevant to the discussion today, is that well encrypted data and badly encrypted data looks exactly the same, right? You can't, there's no way to demonstrate to somebody that this cryptanalytic algorithm is actually strong, because you're looking to demonstrate sort of a negative capability, right? If I come to you with a new graphics card or a new CPU or a new database sorting algorithm, I can demonstrate the things that you care about in terms of, hey, this is faster, this consumes less power, and the rest of it. The tricky business about cryptography is that what you're saying is, I'm going to encrypt this data, and there's a bunch of things that can't happen, right? In a whole universe of possibilities, right? That there is no way to derive the key that's going to sort of unprotect or decrypt this data. And what that means is that you need to be open to a whole universe of possible attacks, sort of known and unknown, right? And this is one of the things that makes it interesting, and also I think difficult for people in the enterprise space, which is that they're being asked to sort of bet part of their business, or bet the security of their data on these statements, often obscure and subtle kinds of arguments about the strength of these protection mechanisms in a way that can't be demonstrated. So the way that fits into the discussion we're having today is that there is on the horizon potentially a bunch of discontinuous change in the way that people think about computing, and that's quantum computers, right? So there have been lots of other discussions about how quantum computers work and what they can do. But with relevance to the crypto space, there are two algorithms that change fundamentally the way that people can do searches in two different spaces that affect the way that that people are going to have to protect data with cryptographic mechanisms. So if there comes to be a practical quantum computer, that is to say something that could implement the AES algorithm, or something that could implement, let's say RSA or elliptic curve, things like that, is that enough qubits to express those algorithms, then searches become quicker, and not just quicker in a way where a traditional CPU gets faster, or you use a GPU for more computers. It's the algorithms move time from the exponent down to the bottom, which is to say it's the difference between a bubble sort and a quicksort algorithm, which is these differences are dramatic. And for cryptography, that's especially big, because you need these search spaces to be big in terms of the cryptographic algorithm has to be efficient encrypting data for the person that's actually using it, but the search space that for the attacker has to remain really, really big, right? Because you're relying on it now and in the future. So what's going on now with people looking at what's called post-quantum cryptography algorithms is that they're saying, well, we have to start now. There are no quantum computers right now that can even get close to expressing these algorithms or attacking them. But if we hypothesize that there's a real probability of this happening in, say, 20 or 30 years, we might have data now that is going to be, we want to keep private, or we want to have some expectation of security of that data in the next 20 or 30 years. And also, historically, it has been a slow and arduous process to migrate from one cryptographic algorithm to the other. So, in the payment space, there are still people using triple DES, which is actually a fine algorithm, but that industry has been attempting to move from triple DES to AES for decades, and there's still some of this around. So, that was an awfully long-winded answer to your question.
That's fine.
But the short answer is that the world is changing, and one of those changes that people are anticipating is that there's going to be this fundamentally new kind of computer that's going to alter the way that we have to think about cryptography in terms of throwing away whole classes of algorithms that we use now.
So Terrence, think about the point you were just making as it relates to also kind of the type of data. So as an example, when we think about whether it's transactional data or, let's say, legacy data, you have to hold on to it for many decades, as you kind of referred to as an example. Does it really make a difference as kind of the specific type of information or type of data as far as its resistance to CRQCs or not?
Not really. So in terms of resistance to quantum cryptanalysis, it's fundamentally about the algorithm, not about the data. Where the type of the data becomes relevant and interesting to think about is that you might have to start thinking about, do I have classes of data that the privacy of that data is going to be relevant in a couple of decades, right? So if you're talking about a credit card transaction, probably not. If you're in the government space, or you're protecting things that that you might realistically have privacy impacts in a couple of decades, yeah, I mean, moving now is probably the case. But also for data that, outside of the data, the algorithmic thing is we know that moving those algorithms is going to be tough. So there's reasons to start thinking about it now in terms of doing those migrations.
Terrence, how do you characterize quantum attacks, and what types of algorithms can mitigate against them?
The quantum attacks fall into two categories, sort of the good news and the bad news kinds of attacks. So there are two algorithms that people care about in the quantum space, and one of them is a generalized search algorithm. And what it means is that, and this is highly counterintuitive, is that for a quantum computer, if you want to give it the job of saying, find this item in a list of length n, if you think about that with a traditional computer, that's a job where on average, you're going to have to look at n over 2 items. So you're just going to basically march through the list. Is this it? Is this it? Is this it? Down until you've completed the list. Quantum computer, because of the way that they're structured, there is a quantum algorithm that says I can search that list in square root of n time. Now that's a little mind-blowing, because what it means is I can search a list of size n without looking at all n things, or without having to take n steps to do it. But this algorithm affects essentially almost anything where you're searching for a key, because searching for a key is equivalent to that searching through a list, right? Is it key number 1? Is it key number 2? Is it key number 3? On down to, is it key number 2 to the 128th? That has a primary effect on symmetric key cryptography, because those key spaces are dense and they are essentially looking through lists, right? Which is to say 128-bit AES, like all 128-bit numbers are potential AES keys, so you have to search that whole space. There's no structure that you can be skipping around in. The good news is that the square root of n limit within the current theory of quantum computation is a hard limit. Right? It's not going to get faster than that. And we know how to solve that problem, because square root of n says if I take, let's say, 128-bit key, the square root of 2 to the 128th is 264. So we know the impact that a quantum computer is going to have there in terms of reducing the size of your key space by half. Now, luckily, some people at NSA and other parts of the federal government were farsighted enough when they designed the AES standard to say we should have AES 128, but hey, it's probably a good idea to have AES 256, because the consequence of having AES 256 is that this square root attack takes AES 256 and puts it back to 128 bits of security, but nobody believes that 120 bits of security is insufficient for any particular job. So if you're in the position of using AES 256, that attack vector is essentially closed off for quantum computers as we understand them now, right? And in a very, very general sense. And that's an easy change for most people to make. The bad news is the other algorithm, which is Shor's algorithm, is about the fundamental problems of taking something called a discrete logarithm, which is very related to another cryptographic problem that people have typically heard about, which is factorization of a large number, right? So if I take 2 primes, p and q, I multiply them together, how hard is it to, for a very, very large number, n, find a p or q from their multiplication? And this is where Shor's algorithm comes in. And Shor's algorithm says that we can do these factorization or discrete logarithm problems, which are important for almost every key exchange algorithm we have right now. And perform them much, much more efficiently. So it's not a square root thing. It's a moving from a e to the n kind of problem to a logarithmic in that, as opposed to an exponential. But what that means is that that we can't make the key sizes big enough to make the attacker's job hard anymore. And the bad news there is that most systems, even if you use 256-bit AES, you're at some point exchanging that key using a key exchange algorithm that's in this other class of algorithms that's dependent on factorization or discrete logarithm in order to maintain strength. And there, the job is not just moving to 256-bit AES, it is to find a new class of algorithms that are not vulnerable to quantum cryptanalysis. The silver lining to this cloud is that the folks at NIST, National Institute for Standards and Technology, have spent the last 6 years working with cryptographers basically around the planet on sort of bring the Justice League together, superheroes assemble kind of job to say, hey, how do we find algorithms that are not vulnerable to these kinds of attacks? Because things like elliptic curve, RSA, that we're using right now are fatally wounded in the quantum model, to the point of, like, you can't make a bigger key size. It just, the attacker's attacks are just too fast.
And the first set of these are slated to be released publicly, right, in 2024. Is that right? I mean, they have some that they posted out there for
they're
review.
actually, so they had initially They started this a while ago. They had a number of candidates that have been whittled down. The first accepted algorithms in the geekiest fashion possible. They're called crystals Kyber and crystals dilithium, thereby satisfying the Star Wars and the Star Trek fan communities. I thought that was a wise decision on their part. But these are a signature and key exchange algorithms that use a different form of mathematics that's not dependent on factorization or discrete logs. Instead uses these other sets of lattice problems, but they use a form of mathematics that are not amenable to quantum cryptanalysis. NIST has essentially said these are the candidates that we're moving forward with in standardization. The NSA actually came out with, I think it was last month, a recommendation saying defense agencies and other people outside of the commercial sector should be moving in that direction also, in terms of the crystals algorithms are should be the basis for protecting data going forward. So it's been a huge effort, but I can't say enough good things about the quiet, undercompensated, underappreciated work that NIST does in terms of sorting out the cryptographic world for people that have to use these kinds of algorithms.
It does seem to be a bit of an arms race right now going on between kind of, rule supremacy, if you will, for kind of quantum computing, right? China's got some things going on, right? We in the US have seen that. Then the White House is coming out and saying, hey, we want to be able to have a formal plan of, being able to actually migrate many of our systems and national security, obviously as the umbrella over that concerns, to kind of these quantum resistant, if you will, type of cryptography, right? So if you think about that, they've kind of put it in a stake on the ground that says by 2035, we want to be able to get to that point. I mean, what are your thoughts realistically? Is that achievable?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people seem to be pretty motivated by this. And the fact that we have done a couple of changes right now in terms of moving from sort of the DES-based schemes to AES, there are some things that will be, I think, quite straightforward to change. So for communication security, the standard right now is TLS. And the standard for the implementation of TLS are the OpenSSL libraries. I mean, there are some of others of them out there, but the majority of the world has sort of coalesced in terms of this is how we do communication security. These are the ways that we implement it using these libraries. One of the things that's happened over the past decade is that people have realized that implementation of cryptographic algorithms and protocols is enormously tricky. There have been this whole class of attacks around timing attacks and these sort of side effect things that happen when you don't have what's called constant time implementations of these algorithms. That is, that you can start inferring keys on the basis of how long it took somebody to compute a particular cryptographic operation. The world has come a long way in terms of fixing those problems by carefully implementing these algorithms, but it also means that people have sufficiently or close to sufficiently warned against implementing them themselves, instead using these carefully vetted, centralized kinds of implementations like OpenSSL. So I think we have plenty of time for communication security for moving from today's algorithms to post-quantum algorithms simply by using OpenSSL in a way where you say, basically, I'm going to use a different key exchange algorithm at some point in the future. And the OpenSSL guys have been keeping up with this, and I think the path there is pretty great. There's a second class of attacks in terms of, again, if I have communications that I'm performing now, that I'm worried about the security of a number of decades down the line, there's this other more exotic form of attack in terms of, hey, maybe I as an attacker am recording that data and I'm just going to store it away until the capabilities to break the crypto that protect it come along sometime farther down the line. I think the number of people that have to particularly worry about that is somewhat small, but there are certainly those organizations in the world. They may have to migrate much more quickly or come up with other mechanisms that are going to protect them in the face of these sort of attacks from the future.
So in general, you're not an alarmist. You're seeing the progress that NIST and the algorithms, the crystal algorithms are making. You think there's enough time before a adversary could take advantage of a CRQC computing capability, and to actually launch attacks in real time. In general, your guidance to folks is to monitor the situation, to start a plan to be transitioning over to these crystal algorithms, and be a little more agile in your systems, right?
So I would say for lots of mainstream use cases, the path forward is exactly what you said, basically, like use of these libraries, monitoring the situation, making sure that you're not welding in dependence on particular algorithms, and having that sense of agility. Where I think there may be threats at some point in the future is the same place that there are threats right now, which are systems that don't get updated. For the computers that we use every day, that's fine. Where things get tricky are embedded systems, SCADA devices, things inside of vital parts of infrastructure that the software just sits there and kind of rots, right?
And can be difficult to update.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even even outside of the quantum attacks, which are more speculative, there are just concrete attacks that are going to occur on those kinds of computing systems until we find better ways of, as you said, being agile, of updating them, even outside of algorithmic attacks, just in terms of other kinds of side channel and other kinds of attacks that are going to occur. I think as an industry, we need to be better about moving things forward. And also just sort of examining assumptions that we have within the security community about how we do things.
Yeah, and I think you just hit it right there. It's important to be able to adapt. These things are happening. They're moving rather quickly now. This, again, we said kind of more of a sense of urgency, even on a national scale, right, an international scale. But I think it's just a very interesting topic for our audience to understand kind of really what's happening in this space, a little bit of the history, but where we're going. Some perspective from you in sharing that was very helpful. So we really appreciate you coming on today, Terrence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Terrence.
Thanks for listening to the Reimagining Cyber podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you would like to have us cover a specific topic of interest, feel free to reach out to us, and you can find out how in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe. This podcast was brought to you by CyberRes, a micro-focused line of business, where our mission is to deliver cyber resilience by engaging people, process, and technology to protect, detect, and evolve.